Cypress Hollow was the kind of suburban community that advertised itself as serene, the kind of place where lawns gleamed like polished emeralds, mailboxes matched in perfect symmetry, and the HOA newsletter arrived every month printed on heavy ivory paper. Behind that glossy illusion, though, the neighborhood was simmering with quiet tension, and at the center of it all was its president, Mrs. Larkin. For 6 years, Mrs. Larkin had ruled Cypress Hollow like a self-appointed monarch. Her pastel cardigans and polite smile hid a streak of authoritarian control that made her both feared and despised. Every resident had a story: the man fined for leaving his garbage bins out for 10 extra minutes, the young couple threatened with a lien over holiday lights that didn't meet the aesthetic standard, the elderly widow chastised for having too many garden gnomes. Mrs. Larkin's reach was absolute, and her word, final. When her husband had passed away 3 years prior, her grip on the HOA only tightened. The board meetings became less about policy and more about power. She began installing surveillance cameras at the entrances, ordering patrols by the private security company, and handing out violation notices with mechanical precision. Even her closest allies on the board started to drift away, tired of the drama, the control, and the endless confrontations that came with questioning her authority. But it wasn't until a new homeowner moved in at the edge of the cul-de-sac, a quiet man named Mr. Green, that things truly began to unravel. He was polite, low profile, and seemed uninterested in the gossip that swirled through the neighborhood like pollen. But Mrs. Larkin didn't trust him. Maybe it was the old truck he parked in his driveway, or the fact that his lawn wasn't clipped to the exact height regulation of 2.5 inches. Maybe it was that he didn't show up at her welcome committee brunch. Whatever it was, Mrs. Larkin saw him not as a neighbor, but as an intruder. By spring, the violation notices began to pile up at his door, first for the truck, then for unauthorized modifications to his fence, then for improper waste disposal because he missed a trash pickup day. Each one came signed in her neat cursive handwriting, and each one went ignored. Neighbors whispered about it on evening walks. Some said she was obsessed. Others said he was baiting her, knowing she'd snap. But no one could have predicted what would happen next, or how far Mrs. Larkin was willing to go to protect the neighborhood's integrity. It started with a complaint, an official one, filed to the HOA about unregistered machinery being operated on Green's property late at night. Mrs. Larkin herself decided to investigate. One humid Thursday evening, she marched down the cul-de-sac with a flashlight, camera phone in hand, determined to catch whatever offense she imagined was taking place. What happened in the next few minutes would change Cypress Hollow forever. The video would later circulate online in chopped fragments, heavily edited to remove identifying details. But even with the blurring and bleeping, the scene was unmistakable. The HOA president, wielding a weapon, shouting, and a confrontation spiraling out of control. By the time the police arrived, half the neighborhood had already come outside, and Mrs. Larkin, trembling, furious, and certain she'd been provoked, had no idea her reign over Cypress Hollow was about to end. The footage spread like wildfire. It began on a neighborhood Facebook group, a post labeled HOA President Incident, unedited, uploaded by someone whose profile was deleted an hour later. Within a day, copies appeared on YouTube, TikTok, and local forums. The video was only 34 seconds long, but that was enough. In the first few seconds, Mrs. Larkin's voice could be heard shouting off camera, her flashlight beam jerking wildly through the dark. Then came the unmistakable sound, a car door slamming, someone yelling to get off my property, and a flash of metal reflecting in the light. A scream. A thud. Then chaos. The video cut off abruptly. When police body cam footage was later leaked, with names and addresses redacted, it filled in the blanks. Officers arrived to find Mrs. Larkin standing in the street, still clutching a heavy metal flashlight that was bent near the base. Mr. Green sat on the curb, holding his arm, shaken but alive. The charge: aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. The neighborhood fractured overnight. Some residents defended her, calling her a protector, a good woman who snapped. Others were horrified, insisting the HOA had long been a breeding ground for unchecked authority. The board called an emergency meeting, and for the first time in years, Mrs. Larkin was not in attendance. The treasurer resigned. The secretary refused to take minutes. The homeowners, once silent, began demanding dissolution of the HOA entirely. Meanwhile, the media caught on. The story of a suburban HOA president arrested for attacking homeowner was irresistible. News vans appeared at the community entrance. Reporters camped by the gate, hoping for interviews. Even national channels picked it up. though every broadcast blurred faces and redacted names. Mrs. Larkin's house, once the immaculate centerpiece of the neighborhood, became a symbol of everything wrong with gated community culture. The flowers wilted, the mailbox overflowed with unopened letters, and the HOA newsletter, printed the week before her arrest, now read like irony, "Maintaining order keeps us strong." But there was something else. As more residents came forward, stories surfaced about prior confrontations, threats, fines, incidents hushed up by the board. Someone even produced an email chain showing that Mrs. Larkin had been warned by another member about taking things too far. That email had gone unanswered. The police report noted that she'd been highly agitated and that the object she used, a reinforced flashlight often used by security, qualified as a weapon due to intent and force. The bond hearing was brief. She was released pending trial, but Cypress Hollow had already changed forever, and yet, even as the headlines faded, one mystery remained. Who had filmed the original video, the one that set the whole internet on fire? No one ever came forward, but someone in the neighborhood knew. Months passed. The manicured perfection of Cypress Hollow slowly decayed. Without Mrs. Larkin's relentless oversight, lawns grew uneven, paint began to peel, and Christmas decorations appeared far past January. For the first time, the community felt human, flawed, unregulated, alive. But beneath that newfound freedom lay a quiet unease. No one could quite move on. Mrs. Larkin's trial drew near. Rumors said she'd taken a plea deal. Others claimed she was fighting the charges, convinced she'd been the victim of defamation. Her lawyer issued vague statements about misunderstandings and self-defense, but the evidence was damning. The weapon, the footage, the witness statements, all painted a picture of a woman who had lost control. The HOA board officially dissolved 2 weeks before the court date. The remaining funds were redistributed to homeowners, though no one could agree on who should manage the transition. For a while, residents tried to keep things civil, but old divisions lingered. The community group chat became a battlefield of snide remarks and passive-aggressive posts. Then, one morning, flyers appeared taped to every mailbox. No one saw who put them up. They showed still frames from a video, the ones that had never been made public, and a single line printed in bold, "Someone filmed this." Someone you still wave to every day. Panic returned. Cameras were checked, neighbors accused, whispers reignited. People began deleting posts, scrubbing old comments, pretending they hadn't been involved. It was as if the ghost of Mrs. Larkin's control had returned, not through her, but through the paranoia she'd left behind. When the verdict was announced, guilty on the lesser charge of assault with a weapon, sentenced to community service and probation, few in Cypress Hollow celebrated. Most just closed their blinds. The world moved on, but the neighborhood didn't. The house where Mrs. Larkin had lived stood empty for months, its windows dark, the "for sale" sign collecting dust. Eventually, a new family bought it, unaware of the history. They painted the shutters, redid the garden, and smiled at passers-by. Yet, sometimes, when the wind passed through the cul-de-sac at night, neighbors swore they could still hear the faint hum of a flashlight clicking on, and a voice, stern and disapproving, calling out from the dark. Cypress Hollow became quieter after that, but never peaceful. The HOA was gone, but its shadow lingered, stretching long across the perfectly aligned driveways. Everyone knew what had happened there. Everyone had seen the video. And though the identifying information had been blurred, every resident knew exactly who they were watching. Some said justice had been done. Others said it had only just begun. Either way, the Queen of Cypress Hollow had fallen, and her kingdom would never recover.